The Houston Rockets season is over, and now we go into maybe the most interesting offseason in the history of the franchise. They have a fast-rising, exciting young team that's clearly ready to take the next step, but also lacks a true alpha, a true star at the center of their offense. And the entire goal of their offseason will be to find a way to acquire one of those guys in a summer in which more than a few of them look to be available. To put it simply, the Rockets have done it. When you rebuild your team, when you trade away James Harden, when you tank for years, when you focus on stockpiling picks and developing your young players, you do it all for off seasons like what the Rockets are facing this year. I'm fully confident that big changes are coming to Houston over the next few months. The only questions left are, who are they getting? And who are they trading? And anytime you go into an offseason like this with so many big decisions to be made, you first need to evaluate your own roster. You need to figure out what worked for them this year. And obviously, this was an outstanding season for Houston. Even people that had high expectations for Houston certainly didn't expect them to finish as the second best team in the Western Conference and put together a competitive series against a playoff-proven Warriors team. And even with a flawed roster, they outperformed pretty much everyone's expectations. They have a ton of young talent. They can really guard. They're incredible defensively. They can get out in transition. They're one of the most athletic teams in the entire league. They figured some stuff out in terms of rebounding towards the end of the year. There's a lot to like in Houston, which means that if you're going to go out and get one of these big time stars, you got to figure out who you're willing to give up. Who are the pieces that you want to keep that are going to be on the team when the team is really, really good, like contender level good, and who are the guys you're okay getting rid of? If you're going after Durant, Booker, Giannis, any of these guys, you've got to know what lengths are you willing to go to? Who are you willing to give up? In general, I think these are the schools of thought surrounding Houston's roster. Tier 1, the number one asset is Amen Thompson, and he is untouchable. We've gotten reports of that. I think even if it wasn't reported, people would just assume that that's the wild card on the roster. That's the guy with the highest potential. That's the guy whose skill set works really well alongside of a star if he can figure out how to space the floor off the ball. He does so many things for you, and the ceiling is really just unlimited for Amen Thompson, to the point that I don't think that they would trade Amen Thompson for any of the guys we're going to talk about in this video in conjunction with other assets. And I know that sounds crazy, but I really think that Amen Thompson is that good, and they know that they have enough assets on their roster to get almost anyone in the league without including him in a deal. I think he's untouchable. That's the guy you can't move. Tier 2, I think, is Alperen Sengun. I think Sengun is someone that they're really going to fight to keep on their team, even in a scenario in which they did trade for one or maybe even two stars. He has a very interesting and unique game, but I think it's a game that can work really well alongside of other guys. Obviously, defensively, you're going to have to figure some stuff out, but they've already got such a good defensive infrastructure that I think Sengun still works in whatever capacity you add an elite perimeter creator, and then Sengun is the screener off of that and can punish mismatches in the post. And again, you got to figure some stuff out on defense, but I really think that if they can help it, they're going to try and keep Amen Thompson first, and then they're going to try and keep Sengun. And then tier 3 are the role guys. You're talking about Tari Eason first, you're talking about Jabari Smith second, guys that, again, work really well alongside of stars, because we've seen over the last decade or so that when you're bringing in one of these guys via a trade, they not only want to play alongside of another star, which currently Houston doesn't have, but they also want to see an infrastructure that makes sense around them. It's why the Nets and the Clippers had success bringing in stars in the summer of 2019. They have guys on their roster that are going to guard, that are going to shoot threes, that are going to cut, that are going to rebound, and Houston has a bunch of those guys. Tari Eason and Jabari Smith, I think, at the top of the list. And in theory, if they were to go out and get one of the guys we're going to talk about in this video, they'd prefer to keep Amen Thompson, Alperen Sengun, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith first and foremost above anybody else if they're trying to put together a team around a star at the core of it. After that, I'm pretty sure they're fine trading away anybody else on the roster. And that's a lot of stuff. Like, you have a lot of assets here. You have Fred VanVleet with a $44 million team option this offseason that they have to make a decision on. You've also got Dillon Brooks. Both of those guys' contracts could be pivotal and critical in potentially adding a star. You got Jalen Green, who I'm going to guess in any scenario in which they're adding a big time player is going to end up elsewhere, just because that's the spot on the roster that they need to upgrade. He just hasn't developed to the point that they need him to as a playmaker, as a consistent scorer, and he's still has a high enough upside that I think he would still be attractive to other teams as a possible trade asset, and his contract works pretty well there as well. You've also got some of those high upside assets that are still really unknown in terms of guys like Cam Whitmore, and even someone like Reed Shepherd that I'm sure the Rockets would like to keep. I don't think his value to them is on the level of any of the guys that we've talked about previously when you're thinking about the tiers of assets on the team. And I think Reed Shepherd, again, is a guy that just went really high in a draft that, albeit wasn't great, but still has a lot of potential. I think that's a good asset for them. And then, of course, they have some future picks. They have future picks from Phoenix as well as Brooklyn, in addition, of course, to some of, but not all of, their own first-round picks moving forward into the future. And, of course, those Phoenix picks position them really, really well to potentially go out and get someone like Devin Booker or Kevin Durant, assuming Phoenix would want their own picks back. So, given all those assets, given the situation, who are they trading for? Well, there's, of course, three big names here. First and foremost is Kevin Durant. This is the guy that continues to be connected to them. This is the guy that, in theory, would be a really, really nice fit at the center of their team. You've got the previous relationship that he has with Ime Udoka from their time in Brooklyn, because he was an assistant in Brooklyn before he took the Celtics job when KD was there. So there's a bit of a connection there. And in terms of assets that they would have to trade out, Kevin Durant, ironically, is probably the cheapest trade option of any of the three guys that we are going to talk about for a variety of different reasons, a few of which are problems for the Rockets and potentially reasons for them to not trade for him in the first place. But amongst their realistic trade options this offseason, Durant would not cost as much as some of the other options that we're going to talk about. And as I mentioned, gives them exactly what they need: a legit star scorer late in games. A guy that if you're down 5 with 4 minutes left, you can give the ball to Kevin Durant on mid-post ISOs for 5 straight minutes, and you're going to get decent to good shots every single time down the floor. They don't have that guy on the roster right now. It's not Jalen Green. It's not Sengun, as much as I like Sengun. And none of the other guys are good enough as creating any of their own shots or any of their own space to be on that level. And Durant certainly is. Now, we know that Phoenix and Kevin Durant want to try and work out a trade, and Houston is a great spot for him to try and win theoretically, but there's obviously no guarantee Durant actually ends up in Houston. If they were to have discussions, they've got a bunch of different trade packages they could offer. One that would work would be something like Jalen Green plus Dylan Brooks plus Phoenix's own first-round pick in 2027, which kind of bridges the gap for them between still competing now because you've got Dylan Brooks there, and then Jalen Green could develop alongside Devin Booker. You get your own pick back in 2027. That would be a decent haul in exchange for Phoenix. If they have ideas of getting a similar trade package back from what they traded out for Durant a couple of years ago, that they have lost their mind. That's just not going to happen. Things have changed with the league in terms of the new CBA, and things have changed in terms of Durant's value around the league for a couple of different reasons, a variety of which could prevent Houston from even trading for him in the first place. First and foremost, he's a 2026 free agent, so any team trading for Kevin Durant has to be confident that not only he would want to stay there long term, but also that they'd be willing to give him a bunch of money to continue to play, even given some of his injury issues and the fact that he's getting older. Like, this is a guy that has been in the league for a very, very long time, and so you're not guaranteed that he's going to be worth whatever new contract you give him, assuming you can get him to sign a new contract with your team. Not to mention the fact that he might not want to go to Houston. This might not even make them enough of a contender just trading for Durant on his own. They might have to go out and get somebody else, which could limit the assets they could send back. And we don't even know if Houston would want him, which brings me to the second guy on the list for them, Devin Booker. I really, truly think that if you gave the front office in Houston truth serum, they would rather wait for Devin Booker and string that situation along and risk the possibility of missing out on Kevin Durant as a result, rather than go all in and be super aggressive trying to trade for Durant now. I think that Devin Booker is the guy that fits better on their team, fits better on their timeline. Yes, would be more expensive to trade for, but is also on a longer term contract and just fits where Houston is going as a team much better than someone like Kevin Durant. Now, at this point, there's no indication that Booker wants out or that Phoenix would want to trade him, and the focus is going to be on Durant. But I truly think that the Rockets would rather just wait and see if something shakes loose with the Booker situation, whether it be them just offering so much that the Suns are just forced to at least consider the offer, and or Booker potentially looking at the situation and realizing that he needs to leave in order to compete, and Houston would be a great opportunity for him to do that. Again, just a sample trade package here would be something like Jalen Green, Reed Shepard, Aaron Holiday for contracts, Cam Whitmore, and 2 of Phoenix's future first-round picks, one this year and one in 2027. Again, that's not necessarily what you want to be doing this offseason. If you're Phoenix, you're probably going to want more stuff than that, but depending on how the situation works out with Devin Booker, whether he does or doesn't want to leave, this could certainly be an option that Houston explores, and they could offer more than this if they really wanted to, if they felt like they still had enough left over to compete around Booker. Yes, this is a lot to give up, but I still think that he is the better fit over someone like Kevin Durant. You're still going to have some assets left over to add more, and really, it all just depends on if he wants out. If we get a Devin Booker trade request, things change pretty dramatically, not only for Houston's offseason, but for where Kevin Durant ends up as well. But lastly, and the big fish, the number one guy that everybody's going to be trying to wait on this offseason is, of course, Giannis. I hadn't really fully considered this as an option for Milwaukee because Giannis has just been so loyal for them, but Damian Lillard's now out for all of next season, and there's really no way, we've talked about this in previous videos, there's no way you can convince Giannis that he's going to have a real chance to compete over the next couple of seasons, given that Dame is now going to be out for a while. So at that point, does Giannis meet with the Bucks and say, okay, it's clear I need to go somewhere else, I want to try and win some titles, and he then requests a trade, which immediately makes him the biggest star on the market, which immediately puts Houston in position to potentially trade for him. It is a little bit of a weird fit because he's over 30, he's had some injury stuff the last couple of years, and he's not the kind of elite plug-and-play perimeter scorer like Devin Booker or Kevin Durant are, and he's going to cost more, but I still think Houston is absolutely going to try to add Giannis this offseason if they get the opportunity. In this scenario, it would be something like Jalen Green, Reed Shepard, Aaron Holiday, Cam Whitmore, and then as many first-round picks as you want to put into it, as you are comfortable putting into it if you are Houston. It's a little bit of a weird situation for Milwaukee because they don't have access to all of their future first-round picks, so they don't necessarily want to be terrible. And again, this kind of bridges the gap between getting future assets, getting young players, but then not, winning 20 games next season if you're Milwaukee. And obviously for each of these deals, each of these players, there's different versions of all of these trades. Maybe they don't want to keep Fred VanVleet, they use his contract, maybe they turn down his team option, maybe Sengun has to be in one or more of these deals, maybe they split some of these up and they get two guys of this group if they all want to potentially leave their teams in the offseason. This is just some samples of what I'm looking at in terms of assets for Houston, what they could trade for each of these guys. But what if the other thing happens? What if they don't get any of them? What if Durant goes elsewhere because they're waiting and they don't know if that's the guy they want to add, and or Durant just doesn't want to go to Houston in the first place, and they can't convince Devin Booker to leave, they can't pry him away with a big offer, and Giannis just stays with the Bucks out of loyalty, or Houston just isn't on his list? Then what? Because clearly they're ready for the next step, but they need to be better on offense, and guys like Jalen Green just haven't been able to get them there. And as exciting as the situation is and what they could be going into this offseason, there's a real possibility that they just run it back next year and hope that the young guys develop. And at that point, they'd still be very good, but they wouldn't be contenders. And given the stars that are available this offseason, it certainly would be disappointing if they didn't get anyone, which leads me to my final point. Given all of that stuff that we've just put together in a video, I really think Houston is going to be as aggressive as possible in trying to get one of these guys. You've got an opportunity to bring in Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, or Giannis, or some other guy this offseason, and you don't know when that opportunity is going to come up again. This is clearly the best time to make this move happen, and realistically, you can't go into next year, given all of those options, and really feel good about your team unless you really tried everything you could to get one of those guys. I personally cannot wait to see what happens in Houston this offseason because I think the level of aggression combined with the amount of assets that they have is going to make for a very interesting offseason for the Rockets.